The streets of Cebu have become rivers of destruction. Bodies float past submerged cars as rescue helicopters circle overhead through sheets of rain, their searchlights cutting through the darkness to find survivors clinging to rooftops and cell phone towers. Typhoon Kalmaegi has already claimed 114 lives across the central Philippines, with 127 people still missing beneath the murky floodwaters. But satellite data shows something far more terrifying approaching from the Pacific, a monster storm that's rapidly intensifying over the same warm waters that just fed Kalmaigi's fury. Another super typhoon, potentially stronger than anything the region has seen this year, is barreling toward the same devastated islands. The Philippines has less than 4 days to prepare for what could be a catastrophic one-two punch that reshapes the archipelago forever. The devastating scope of Kalmaigi's destruction reveals the Philippines' vulnerability to rapid succession storm impacts. Within 48 hours of landfall on November 4th, Typhoon Kalmaegi transformed entire cities into disaster zones that resemble war-torn landscapes. Cebu City recorded 183 millimeters of rainfall in a single day, more than its entire monthly average of 131 millimeters, essentially experiencing a month's worth of rain in 24 hours. Devastating storm surges exceeding 3 meters swept inland with the force of tsunami waves, turning urban streets into deadly torrents that trapped families on rooftops and forced thousands to flee with nothing but the clothes on their backs. Alarming, the death toll reached 114, with 127 still missing, primarily from drowning and flash floods that gave residents mere minutes to escape their homes. In Cebu province alone, 49 people drowned as waters rose faster than anyone anticipated. Rescue teams describe finding entire neighborhoods submerged up to second-story windows, with cars completely underwater and debris fields stretching for kilometers. The destruction extends far beyond flooding. Landslides buried homes in hilly regions, fallen trees crushed entire families, and electrocution deaths mounted as power lines fell into standing water. Displaced were over 380,000 people who were evacuated or forced from their homes, with more than 260,000 from high-risk areas across the Visayas region. Infrastructure damage includes widespread power outages affecting multiple islands, disrupted water systems that may take weeks to restore, and blocked roads buried under mud, rocks, and debris. Air travel saw over 160 flights canceled, stranding thousands of passengers and hampering relief operations. Urgent. What makes this catastrophe particularly alarming is not just the immediate devastation. It is the timing and the meteorological pattern emerging across the Pacific. Weather models from Pagasa and the Joint Typhoon Warning Center are tracking another tropical system, designated TD32W and soon to be named Fenghuang, that is rapidly intensifying over the same warm Pacific waters that fueled Kalmaigi's destructive power. Early projections suggest this next storm could achieve super typhoon status with winds exceeding 185 kilometers per hour before making landfall in northern Luzon by November 10th, just 6 days after Kalmaigi's impact. But that's only part of the story. The meteorological conditions that created Kalmaegi are now spawning an even more dangerous successor storm. Satellite imagery from NASA and NOAA reveals Tropical Depression 32W developing the characteristic spiral structure and deep convective towers that signal rapid intensification. The same ominous patterns meteorologists observed before Kalmaegi exploded from a tropical depression to a Category 3 typhoon in less than 36 hours. Ocean temperatures across the Philippine Sea remain 2 to 3 degrees Celsius above normal for November, providing the thermal energy that transforms humble tropical depressions into monster storms capable of leveling cities. The numbers tell a disturbing story. Sea surface temperatures are measuring 29 to 30 degrees Celsius when they should be cooling toward winter levels. Wind shear patterns that typically weaken storms at this time of year have shifted dramatically, creating an atmospheric corridor perfect for typhoon development. Upper-level divergence, the atmospheric exhaust system that allows storms to strengthen, remains optimally positioned over the same region that just experienced Kalmaigi's wrath. Computer models from the European Center for Medium-Range Weather Forecasts show Fenghuang potentially reaching intensities that could exceed Kalmaigi's winds of 165 kilometers per hour. The storm's predicted track takes it directly over northern Luzon, home to millions of people in Metro Manila and surrounding provinces who have watched the Kalmaegi disaster unfold just 600 kilometers to the south. This pattern mirrors the atmospheric setup that preceded some of the Philippines' deadliest typhoon seasons, but with a troubling acceleration. The archipelago's position in the Pacific Ring of Fire makes it a natural target for these storms, typically experiencing an average of 20 typhoons annually between May and December. However, what is happening now represents a dangerous compression of seasonal activity. Two major systems impacting overlapping regions within a week, when recovery infrastructure is already overwhelmed and emergency resources are stretched beyond normal capacity. Historical meteorological data shows that back-to-back major typhoons often produce exponentially higher casualty rates, not just because of the storms themselves, but because of what disaster researchers call compound vulnerability. Emergency resources become stretched beyond capacity, evacuation centers fill beyond safe limits, and the psychological resilience of affected populations becomes compromised. The warm Pacific waters that fuel these storms show no signs of cooling, suggesting this pattern could continue through what should be the waning months of typhoon season. Yet what comes next could be even worse. The Philippines has experienced this nightmare scenario before, with devastating consequences that echo today's situation with terrifying precision. In November 2013, Super Typhoon Haiyan, known locally as Yolanda, struck the central Philippines with winds reaching 315 kilometers per hour, making it one of the strongest landfalling cyclones in recorded history. The storm generated storm surges up to 7 meters high that moved inland like a massive tsunami, completely destroying coastal cities. Haiyan killed more than 6,000 people and left entire municipalities like Tacloban uninhabitable for months. Aerial footage from the aftermath showed a landscape that appeared to have been carpet-bombed, with debris scattered across what had once been thriving communities. But Haiyan's deadliest characteristic wasn't just its intensity, it was how the storm caught residents unprepared for the specific type of destruction it would bring. Many Filipinos who had survived countless typhoons throughout their lives were unfamiliar with storm surge terminology and couldn't comprehend the difference between regular flooding and the wall of water that moved faster than anyone could run. Survivors from Tacloban describe watching their neighbors disappear beneath surging waters that carried cars, houses, and entire families inland. Maria Santos, who lost 3 family members that day, recalled, "The water came like a black mountain. It swallowed everything. Houses, trees, people. You could hear screaming, but then just silence." Rescue operations were delayed for days as airports remained underwater and roads became impassable rivers of debris. International aid took nearly a week to reach many affected areas. The economic impact exceeded $2 billion in damages, but the human cost, families permanently separated, entire communities erased from maps, psychological trauma that persists a decade later, remains impossible to calculate. Recovery took years, with some areas still showing scars from Haiyan's passage. Today's situation carries the same warning signs that preceded that disaster: a densely populated archipelago with limited high-ground evacuation routes, emergency systems already strained by a major storm, and a population that may be experiencing disaster fatigue, the dangerous psychological state where people become less responsive to evacuation orders after surviving one catastrophe. The parallels are unmistakable. Kalmaegi's path through the central Philippines mirrors Haiyan's approach, and the meteorological conditions spawning Phungwang match the atmospheric patterns that created the 2013 monster. History isn't just rhyming, it's repeating with frightening accuracy. And now, scientists fear history may be repeating itself. With recovery efforts from Kalmaegi barely underway, the approaching super typhoon threatens to overwhelm the Philippines' disaster response capabilities completely. President Ferdinand Marcos Jr. declared a national state of calamity on November 6th, mobilizing maximum government resources for relief operations that are already proving insufficient for the scale of destruction. Over 380,000 people remain displaced from Kalmaegi, with evacuation centers operating far beyond safe capacity and basic supplies running critically low. Many facilities that survived the initial storm are now dealing with sanitation crises, as overcrowding leads to disease outbreaks among vulnerable populations. Power grids across multiple islands remain completely offline. Utility companies estimate weeks or months for full restoration. Water treatment facilities are flooded and contaminated, forcing residents to rely on potentially unsafe well water or to wait for relief trucks that cannot reach many communities due to washed-out bridges and landslide-blocked roads. The port of Cebu, a critical hub for inter-island commerce, suffered severe damage that will take months to repair, creating supply chain disruptions that extend far beyond the immediate disaster zone. Meanwhile, forecast models show Phung Wang potentially reaching Category 5 strength with a direct path toward Aurora and Isabela provinces in northern Luzon. The storm's projected rainfall totals exceed 350 millimeters over 24 hours, nearly 3 times what Kalmaegi delivered to Cebu. Computer models suggest wind speeds could reach 250 kilometers per hour, with storm surge potential that dwarfs what the central Philippines just experienced. The mathematics of disaster response reveal the true scope of the crisis. Emergency resources that were designed to handle 1 major typhoon per month are now facing 2 Category 3 plus storms within 6 days. Rescue helicopters are already committed to ongoing search operations for Kalmaegi's missing victims, including the recovery of a Philippine Air Force helicopter that crashed during relief efforts on November 4th. Killing 6 crew members en route to Agusan del Sur. Military assets that would normally be available for Phung Wang preparations are tied up in life-or-death rescue missions that could continue for weeks. International aid organizations report coordination challenges as communication networks remain disrupted across vast areas, and assessment teams struggle to reach affected communities to determine actual needs. The Asian Development Bank estimates that full recovery from Kalmaegi could take 2 to 3 years and cost over $5 billion. But those calculations become meaningless if Phung Wang delivers the catastrophic impact that current models predict. The compounding effect of sequential disasters creates exponential rather than additive damage. Infrastructure weakened by the first storm becomes completely vulnerable to the second. Emergency shelters that are currently housing Kalmaegi evacuees may themselves need evacuation if Phung Wang follows its predicted path. The psychological toll on affected populations is already evident, with mental health professionals reporting increased rates of panic attacks and trauma responses among survivors who now face the prospect of enduring another major storm before they have had time to process the first catastrophe. Because what happens next could rewrite maps. Even as meteorologists track Phung Wang's approach with growing alarm, the broader climate pattern suggests the Philippines may be entering an unprecedented period of storm activity that challenges everything experts thought they knew about typhoon seasons. Pacific climate data from the past decade reveals typhoon seasons becoming fundamentally less predictable, with storms maintaining destructive strength longer and following unusual tracks that confound traditional forecasting models. Elevated ocean temperatures that fuel typhoon development are remaining high well into traditional post-season periods, creating conditions that can spawn major storms through December and even January. The thermal energy stored in Pacific waters now exceeds historical records for November, suggesting Phung Wang may be just the beginning of an extended period of dangerous weather. Dr. Ricardo Jalad from the National Disaster Risk Reduction Management Council issued a stark warning during emergency briefings this week. Current infrastructure and evacuation protocols were designed for single storm scenarios, not the rapid succession events that climate models increasingly predict as the new normal. The traditional typhoon season calendar that guided Filipino disaster preparedness for generations may no longer be relevant in an era of accelerated climate change. Preview. The approaching storm represents more than an immediate threat to life and property. It is a preview of the Philippines' climate future that demands fundamental changes in how the nation prepares for and responds to natural disasters. As Phung Wang continues its western track across increasingly warm Pacific waters, communities that have spent generations learning to survive typhoon season must now adapt to surviving typhoon sequences that could stretch emergency resources beyond any reasonable capacity. Resilience. The resilience that allowed the archipelago to endure centuries of storms The community networks, traditional knowledge, and cultural adaptations that made survival possible may not be sufficient for the new patterns emerging from our rapidly changing oceans. What's happening in the Philippines this November isn't just a weather event. It's a glimpse into a future where the line between typhoon season and year-round disaster becomes increasingly blurred.